What a year this has been. What a year. Last February, I traveled to Israel with a group of Jewish leaders from the metro Atlanta area, mostly rabbis, but also other professionals. Our first morning there, we were meeting with Rachel Korazin. Rachel is an incredible educator. She focuses on teaching both Israel and Holocaust studies, and she often teaches those through the lens of poetry. As people were walking into the room where she was going to be presenting, someone walked over to her and, trying to be friendly, said to her, "Boker Tov, good morning. How are you doing?" She turned her head and looked into her greeter's eyes and said somewhat sadly, "You can't say that anymore." Boker Tov, good morning. People can't say that in Israel anymore, she said. As our session with her began, she said, "Ein milim." There are no words. Now, she's a magnificent scholar. I've studied with her before, the first time almost 15 years ago. I've never known her to be at a loss of words. Quite the opposite, she always had something erudite to share. And as a poet herself, her erudition was always shared eloquently. But when she was speaking to us about life in Israel after October 7th, she began by saying, "Ein milim." There are no words. Yet, however hard it is to talk about, whether because of the pain endured that day, the pain endured since that day, the divisions that followed, we must speak. Ein milim. There are no words, but there must be. October 7th was brutal. One of the hardest things I've done was to visit some of the devastation in Israel last February and to walk through the decimated streets of Kfar Aza, one of the kibbutzim assaulted by Hamas. I saw the homes riddled with bullet holes. I went to the site of the Nova Music Festival. Poppies at the time were coming up out of ground, almost as if to say, in remembrance of those who were killed and those who were taken hostage there. I went to Sderot, a city just a few miles from Gaza, also assaulted. Sderot is no stranger to being attacked. It is so close to Gaza that the Iron Dome isn't very effective at protecting it. Yet visiting Sderot City Hall, we were shown the security camera footage from that morning. I saw a young family trying to flee, only to be shot down by terrorists in a pickup truck. I met an elderly rabbi who was shot in the back but miraculously lived to tell his story. He recounted how he was shot in the back and the bullet exited through his chest and how he lay bleeding in the street waiting for what felt like nearly an hour for an ambulance, unable to reach him in the middle of the attack. I couldn't believe that he was shot the way he described and was still alive, but he showed us the suit that he was wearing that day, the suit and the shirt with a bullet hole back and front. It was miraculous that he lived. While he was in the hospital, a rocket crashed through the roof of his synagogue and landed in his office. Had he not been in the hospital recovering from being shot, he might have lost his life then. I know because I saw. Part of what made October 7th so horrible is not just how many civilians were killed, but that civilians themselves were the target. They were targeted for murder, for kidnapping, for rape. And October 7th was the worst attack, but it hasn't been the only attack. Jews as a whole, worldwide, have been under attack. Anti-Jewish crime is as high as it's ever been recorded in the United States. So often we're told that this anti-Jewish bias is really just anti-Zionism. Sometimes it is, but often it's not. It's not anti-Zionism merely to send bomb threats to a synagogue, like what we received here last December. College campuses have received a lot of attention, in particular the encampments from last spring. Some of those protests against Israel included anti-Zionist Jews. Furthermore, various campus clubs or groups, many whose stated mission has nothing to do with the Middle East, banned participation by Zionists. Just Zionists, not necessarily Jews, and therefore, we're told, not anti-Semitic. All of it is to show no anti-Semitism here, just a protest against a country. That's nice. But the truth is, for a great many Jews, we cannot separate our connection to Israel from our Jewish identity, and we shouldn't have to. Anti-Semitism is not actually as old as we sometimes think. Anti-Semitism is just one kind of anti-Jewish hatred. As a concept, anti-Semitism really took off in 19th century Germany. Anti-Semitism defined Jews as a race inferior to the Aryan race. Apparently, the bigoted pseudoscientists believed that hating someone because of their race was more enlightened than hating them because of their religion. That's the reason why eventually the Nazis targeted anyone who had even just a single Jewish grandparent, no matter if they identified as Jewish or not. That's anti-Semitism. But there's also anti-Judaism, the kind that Jews experienced in Spain in the 1400s. Spain gave Jews in the 1400s a choice: exile or conversion. So no, Zionism is not anti-Semitism. But honestly, it feels to me a lot closer to Spain in the 1400s. Give up a belief, they say, convert, get rid of your Jewish belief, and you can stay in peace. Don't give up that belief, and you have no place here. The problem isn't racial, like anti-Semitism. The problem is Judaism, or at least that aspect of being Jewish that makes someone feel connected to our ancestral home. Anti-Jewish thought and belief can actually be categorized one more way. When it's racial, it's anti-Semitism. When it's about Jewish belief, it's anti-Judaism. But sometimes it's neither of those. Sometimes anti-Jewish attitudes have nothing to do with Jews or their beliefs. David Nuremberg wrote in his 2013 book, Anti-Judaism, that Judaism is often propped up as a caricature of whatever a society considers to be evil, in contrast to whatever virtue that society was trying to promote. For example, when society considers religion to be evil, Jews are portrayed as backward pietists. When society considers its own majority religion to be the ultimate virtue, Jews are portrayed as blasphemers. If capitalism was the ideal, Jews were communists. If communism was the ideal, Jews are capitalists. If nationalism is an ideal, Jews are globalists. If nationalism is evil, Jews are chauvinistic nationalists. If the Iraq War was a great American policy failure, then neoconservative Jews were responsible for it. Never mind the fact that at the time, neither the president, vice president, secretary of defense, state, speaker of the House, nor Senate majority leader were Jewish. Jews were to blame. The book was written in 2013, but to continue the line of thinking, if anti-racism is the virtue, then Zionism is racism. If colonialism is the ultimate evil, then Zionism is settler colonialism, no matter how ridiculous that is. On that specific charge, Yossi Klein Halevi remarked that if settler colonialism is one of Europe's great sins, then how awful and ironic that Jews got stuck with the bill for it. In this model, Jews can't win by design because Jews become the scapegoat for whatever a society thinks is most wrong in the world. Or the one Jewish country in the world becomes the scapegoat for all that is wrong in the Middle East. If only Israel did this, we, the Middle East, would be so full of peace. Ayatollah Khamenei, Hezbollah, Hamas, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, they're all just non-actors with no real ability to do anything. It's all on Israel. That doesn't mean we can't criticize Israel. Although the fact that I have to say that in conversation with people who aren't talking about criticizing Israel, but lamenting its existence, is itself problematic. Israel does have choices to make. How to respond to October 7th, how to deal with Hezbollah, how to deal with Iran, which funds and supports various terror armies, and just a couple days ago launched nearly 200 ballistic missiles at Israel. And painfully, Israel also has to decide what concessions to make to secure the release of the hostages. Israel is a democracy. It not only allows, but it needs debate. It's designed as a democracy to function that way. It's like that old joke between two Israelis. One who was born in Israel, the Sabra, and another who came from the former Soviet Union. The native-born Israeli, the Sabra, said to the new arrival, "So, what was life like in the Soviet Union?" "I couldn't complain," he said. "The food, you had enough to eat, it was good? I couldn't complain." "And your home, what was your home like?" "Couldn't complain." "So if you had nothing to complain about over there, why'd you come to Israel?" "You misunderstand me. I had plenty to complain about. I wasn't allowed to complain. I came here so I can complain." And there's a lot of legitimate complaints about accountability at the highest levels, about some of the extreme elements currently serving in the Israeli cabinet, Israeli settler policy in the West Bank, and so on. Let's talk about what Israel has meant to Jews over time. Our people's history in Israel goes back thousands and thousands of years. According to the Torah, it was the home of the first two Hebrews, Abraham and Sarah. Most Jews lived in the land of Israel until about 2,000 years ago. We were forced from our homeland after two consecutive wars with Rome in the year 70 and 135. While some were able to stay, our ancestors that were forced to leave never stopped praying for a return. 3 times a day, every weekday, the traditional Jewish prayer book would have us pray for a return to Zion. The Passover Seder, our ritual meal celebrating freedom and redemption, traditionally ends with the words L'Shana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, because that's what freedom and redemption meant to generation after generation of Jews. Our ancestors in the Middle Ages sometimes were treated better and sometimes treated worse in the places they resided, whether that was Europe or North Africa or the Middle East. But they never considered themselves to be at home, at least not until the modern era, when Jews received full citizenship in places like America and Europe. And while America continues to be a magnificent home for Jews, full citizenship for Jews in much of Europe preceded the Holocaust. So when Israeli Jews say, "Ein li eretz acheret," I have no other land, they're speaking the truth of our people's history. And the vast majority of them don't have the blessing that we have, American citizenship. Their families were ethnically cleansed from Europe, ethnically cleansed from Egypt, ethnically cleansed from Syria, from Lebanon, from Iraq, from Iran, and so on. While the United States and a few other places too, like Canada and the United Kingdom, have thriving Jewish communities, It's more than a little troubling to travel around the world and visit magnificent Jewish sites where there are few, if any, Jews left. The Jewish connection to Israel is part religious, at least for some. But the religious language that some people use is simply a way to give voice to what everyone needs and longs for: a home. That sentiment is captured in Hatikva, Israel's national anthem, that says, "Our hope is not yet lost. The hope of 2,000 years to be a free nation in our own land, the land of Zion and Jerusalem." Jews have a very long and very deep connection to the land of Israel, and we don't need to apologize about it. That's our story. No Jew should be shamed about it. I also want to say that every innocent person killed in war is a tragedy. And I feel that most especially for children, whether Israeli or Palestinian. Not long into the war, I wrote in the Kol Kahila, our newsletter, that I saw a picture of a Palestinian father holding the lifeless body of his child, who appeared to be about the same age as my kids. That picture really affected me. Every child is innocent, and all children are equally precious in the eyes of God. All wars take a terrible toll. We grieve and mourn for our own. It's important we also see the terrible destruction in Gaza. I'd like to conclude with some uplifting thoughts now. One, even with the horrendous year that we've just seen, 2024, is still one of the best times to be alive, even in America, even in Israel. Let's start with here in America. Here in Roswell. We received a bomb threat here last December. That Friday evening, our sanctuary, this sanctuary was packed with people. Not only our own members, but people came from all over the community, including other churches, the city council, the city police, the fire department, and more. The mayor spoke. Pastor spoke. You get the idea. There are a growing number of people that don't like us. They are dwarfed by the people who accept us and see us as full members of the community. And Israel, you have to be in your 80s to remember a world without Israel, so sometimes we take it for granted. It's too easy to forget that Israel was just a prayer, and especially with its often divisive politics, which frequently affects American Jewish life too. Israel doesn't always evoke warm and fuzzy feelings, even amongst American Jews that like it, like myself. Even with that, we'd miss it if it were gone. We would miss it. And lastly, a few ideas on what we personally can do. Deborah Lipstadt, formerly a professor at Emory, and now an ambassador at the State Department with the portfolio of confronting anti-Semitism around the world, has some good advice. She said that it's important to deal with all of the oys, the oy vey of anti-Semitism, the oy vey of war, but oy doesn't define Judaism. Joy does. We must keep the joy in our Judaism. And here's a good way to do that. The awful October 7th massacre occurred on Simchat Torah, what's supposed to be our most joyous holiday. And there will be an Atlanta area-wide remembrance for that attack on October 7th in Sandy Springs. You can come to that. I'll be there. But also, come to our Simchat Torah celebration on Friday night, October 25th, for a joyous night. It's a party disguised as a service. We're going to reclaim our joy as we sing and dance. There is simply no better way to respond to anti-Semitism than reveling in our Judaism. 5784 was a challenging year. May 5785 bring blessings. May the hostages be returned home. May those who are hurt or suffering find healing. May peace finally be realized so that its blessings may be enjoyed by all. Amen.